But briefly, beyond the existential territorial struggle for Ukraine, the war between Russia and Ukraine has a truly global dimensions, particularly on the ideological front. It can be seen as an opposition between, according to the MSMT, by late 2024, at least 11,000 North Korean troops were deployed in Western Russia. North Korea gains access to first-hand lessons from modern high-intensity warfare. Its forces can rapidly acquire skills they previously lacked, particularly in the use of tactical drones, FPVs, and also electronic warfare. That's very important. These elements suggest that North Korea's involvement in Russia and Ukraine poses security and geopolitical risk to South Korea. From a security standpoint, South Korea could find itself in the coming years with thousands of well-trained North Korean soldiers positioned just a few dozen kilometers from its capital, and with a northern neighbor capable of rapidly producing modern weapons tailored for export, so with quality standards higher than what.
러시아-우크라이나 전쟁에 참전한 북한이 전 세계에 돈을 받고 용병을 보내는 그런 상황이 벌어질까요? 우리 나우인 노스코리아 채널은 러시아-우크라이나 전쟁에 참전한 북한군을 계속 주시하고 있습니다. 4년 넘게 이어지고 있는 러시아-우크라이나 전쟁은 이제 단순한 지역 분쟁을 넘어 새로운 국제질서, 즉 평화의 시대가 가고 전쟁의 시대가 왔음을 보여줍니다. 전쟁의 형방은 여전히 불확실하지만 한국 입장에서 중요한 부분은 참전으로 인해 북한의 군사 역량이 강화되고 있다는 것입니다. 우크라이나 전쟁은 사실상 북한군의 무기 실험실이 되었고, 북한군은 드론, 전자전, 장거리 타격 능력 등 현대전의 경험을 빠르게 흡수하고 있습니다. 행여 북한이 이번 경험을 토대로 민간군사기업, 용병이죠, 즉 PMC 형태로 전 세계 분쟁에 개입할 가능성도 우려됩니다. 오늘은 프랑스 무기 전문가이면서 나발 뉴스 편집장 야닉 스말도르와 함께 북한이 러시아 전쟁을 통해 어떻게 군사력을 증강하는지 논의해 보겠습니다.
Right. This time, welcome Yannik Smaldore, Aryan Group. He's one of the most, popular, military experts in France and the Western European country. And then I think he is going to make a presentation on evaluating the DPRK-Russia military partnership, weapons and manpower, and then strategic impact. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Zukbek, for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to join you today, especially as the topic we're addressing is of utmost importance, the growing military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. At the CAPRI, the Center for Analysis and Forecasting of International Risk in Paris, as in all strategic research centers in Europe, we are closely monitoring this situation and its possible developments in Ukraine and more broadly in Europe and the Western sphere of influence. Before addressing North Korea's involvement in the Ukrainian conflict, it is then important to recall the broader geopolitical context. I will not go in too much details about that, as I would only be repeating what has already been discussed in previous sessions of this forum. But briefly, beyond the existential territorial struggle for Ukraine, the war between Russia and Ukraine has a truly global dimensions, particularly on the ideological front. It can be seen as an opposition between autocratic regimes and democratic regimes. By late 2023, Pyongyang's diplomatic support has evolved into logistical support with the delivery of weapons and the dispatch of troops to Russia, and later into strategic support marked by the signing of a security agreement between North Korea and Russia. On another level, and even if it's not exactly the topic of this lecture, it is worth recalling that the war in Ukraine also indirectly involves South Korea. Indeed, South Korean defense industry mainly have become key suppliers of weapons for Ukraine's main European allies, in Central Europe and Northern Europe. And so, to some extent, South Korea is also involved in this conflict. Returning to our main topics. So, direct military support North Korea has to provide to Russian forces. We can see on this brief timeline that Pyongyang began supplying massive weapons to the Wagner Group as early as 2022, including via Syria, and part of this equipment was immediately transferred to the Russian armed force. So the need for North Korean weapons was there from the beginning of the invasion in Ukraine. So officially, the strategic rapprochement between Russia and North Korea only began in September 2023. Yet the speed and scale of the deliveries, the weapon deliveries, suggests that such an agreement must have been prepared months earlier, maybe since the beginning of the war, or at least since Russia started losing battles and a lot of munition stockpiles. So according to multiple observers, including the MSMT, more than 20,000 containers of weapons and ammunition have been shipped by sea from North Korea to eastern Russia, and from there to the western front by train. It remains difficult to establish exactly what type and quantities of weapons and ammunition were transferred, but battlefield reports, as well as American, Ukrainian, and South Korean intelligence, give us some reliable estimates. So, on ballistic missile side, we know for sure that KN-23 and KN-24 ballistic missiles of North Korean origins have been used on several strikes on Ukraine territory. At least 150 of these missiles were delivered according to different sources. We can estimate that maybe 200 could have been delivered, even if not all used for the moment. Those missiles are about 700 to 900 kilometers range, so they're mainly used to target. Concerning the quality and the quantity and quality of ammunition, that was a big subject since the very beginning of the North Korean deliveries. As I mentioned, the exact manifestos of the shipments are unknown, of course. We just know approximately through satellite imagery that around 16,000 containers have been delivered by April this year, and the number may have reached 28,000 containers by mid-July and July. So depending on calibers that were in those containers, this could represent 10 to 14 million shells in total, according to high estimates. Operationally, while early reports suggest poor quality, particularly in artillery shells and propellant, the situation seems to have improved quickly. Ballistic missiles, on the other hand, appear to have been drawn from active North Korean regiments, rather than aging stockpiles, and have shown good overall reliability by Russian standards since the beginning of the deliveries. So even if a lot of observers, Western observers, were hoping that concerning the tactical use of those weapons and ammunition, as I mentioned earlier, North Korean shipments appear closely tailored to Russian needs, both in type and in timing. First, as I said, the artillery shells are used to overwhelm Ukrainian artillery on the front line with long-range firepower, including with the 170 millimeter caliber North Korean guns. Second, the ballistic missiles are used to conduct a long-range strike, including on civilian targets, in order to saturate Kiev's deliveries appear to match Russia's major offensives. This limits the storage time for these munitions, during which time the stocks are more vulnerable to Ukraine's strike and sabotage. Worth noting also, Russia does not seem to use North Korean ammunition for its tanks and other armored vehicles, likely due both to sufficient domestic stockpiles in Russia and to the fact that North Korea still largely uses outdated calibers in its own tanks. So there are only a few stockpiles of 125 millimeters ammunition in North Korea, so they are keeping that for themselves. Okay, so beyond armed deliveries, the Moscow-Pyongyang agreement also involve, and that's very important, the dispatch of North Korean troops mainly soldiers and skilled workers, to sustain Russia's war efforts. According to the MSMT, by late 2024, at least 11,000 North Korean troops were deployed in Western Russia. Today, this number is likely closer to 14,000 to 15,000, depending on of the wounded, with unconfirmed rumors suggesting an additional 20 or 30,000 to follow by the end of the year or maybe next year. That's not confirmed for the moment, but we have to monitor this situation. Among this personnel, Russia, high-ranked officers and ministers has confirmed the arrival of 1,000 combat engineers and 5,000 military construction workers in the Kursk region, tasked to rebuild infrastructure after Ukraine incursions in these areas. It also appears that Moscow has authorized, or may soon authorize, North Korean citizens to enlist directly in the Russian armed force, bypassing the bilateral framework. It was already seen with other citizens from other countries, so there is no reason that it won't also happen with North Korean citizens. Most deployments of North Korean troops are concentrated for now in Russian Kursk and Belgorod regions, where they can help contain Ukrainian raids and rebuild civilian and military infrastructures. But North Korean personnel have also been involved in, for example, training Russian troops on a new weapon system, as I said earlier, carrying out also complex combat engineering missions, not only in the Belgorod and Kursk region, but also on the Ukrainian soil. And also, that's not confirmed for the moment, but probably conducting UAV reconnaissance operations, as those operations now are in the center of every artillery regiment and building regiments. There are also indications that some North Korean soldiers may have been deployed on Ukrainian soil, possibly under Russian uniforms and equipment. Authorities remain uncertain. It is unsure if they are Russian military from North Korean origin, or if they are North Korean soldiers transferred through the agreement between the two countries. So, yeah, the fog of war, it's kind of complicated to have precise details about that. In parallel, though, we can note that around 15,000 North Korean civilian workers are employed in Russia, with another 500 expected soon. It is possible that some of them could later transition into direct military contract with the Russian Defense Ministry. Concerning the combat loss, that's also an important point. It is difficult to estimate North Korean losses, although several Ukrainian strikes on troops and concentration and ammunition depots were widely publicized. They were aiming for North Korean equipment and troops. Current estimates put North Korean casualties at around 5,000, mostly wounded. So some of them may have been may stay in Russia, be healed, and go back to combat. So for the moment, around 3,000 reinforcements have reportedly been sent from North Korea to replace them. Ukrainian intelligence has also noted that North Korean troops quickly adapted their tactics and procedures to reduce further losses and avoid Ukrainian fireback. So they are learning. They are learning fast. Having examined the scale and scope of North Korea's support to Russian forces, it is essential to understand why Moscow seeks these closer partnerships. Russia's interest goes beyond immediate operational needs. It reflects strategic calculations shaped by both short-term pressures and long-term ambitions. Beyond Putin's geopolitical vision of a revanchist global south, Russia's short-term interest is quite clear. First, they want to compensate for industrial shortcomings in producing ammunition and artillery pieces. They want to secure foreign production facilities, also safe from Ukrainian strike and sabotage. They already have done that with the UAVs and also, of course, they want to replace combat engineers and border troops that were heavily depleted over the past 3 years of war. So, yeah, they need also fresh troops in order to send their own citizens in the front. In the longer term, a steady inflow of both North Korean soldiers and civilian workers could help offset Russia's manpower deficits and delay the need for general mobilization. That's also an important political point for Moscow, to delay the general mobilization. So if you can have fresh troops from abroad, it could be easier to maintain peace in your own country. Another strategic goal for Russia is to reinforce North Korea as a regional proxy in East Asia. By restoring Pyongyang's technological and economic leverage, Russia enables North Korea to reassert itself as a regional power. These forces, the US, South Korea, Japan, and their allies, to devote more resources to monitoring and containing North Korea, resources that might otherwise have focused on Russia's own activities in North Pacific. To a lesser extent, this Moscow-Pyongyang rapprochement also weakens China's monopoly over North Korea. We'll get on that later. Overall, this new strategic partnership between Russia and North Korea weakens regional balance, particularly the stability of the Korean peninsula. It is probable that this will notably delay the process of normalizing diplomatic relations between the two Koreas, and in particular the process of reunification, which is now even further away, from my point of view at least. So let's keep to the North Korean point of view. For Pyongyang, the short-term benefits of the participation in this war were also huge. By deploying troops, specialists, observers, in Ukraine, North Korea gains access to first-hand lessons from modern high-intensity warfare. Its forces can rapidly acquire skills they previously lacked, particularly in the use of tactical drones, FPVs, and also electronic warfare. That's very important. So Ukrainian battlefield does become a real laboratory for North Korean military innovation, both in conventional weapons and in new generation systems. We should note at this point that, of course, it's not the case only for North Korean observers. All the main Western suppliers of weapons to Ukraine do the same. They are going on the field, they are looking at what the Ukrainians are doing, and they are learning from them and from their struggle. At a more basic level, these deployments are also exports, just exports. They bring in foreign currency in North Korea, as well as the Russian oil and gas deliveries, which are vital for sustaining North Korea economy and producing consumer goods for North Korean citizens. Through these partnerships, North Korea also gained access to military technology transfers. Well, of course, talking about electronic warfare equipment, that's probably the most important point in the short term. In the longer term, maybe it could also help with the modernization of North Korean air defense, possibly delivery of new fighter aircraft, and even maybe Russian support for developing nuclear-powered submarine in North Korea. That's probably one of the main subjects of this discussion between Pyongyang and Moscow. Anything that would help reduce the current massive technological gap with South Korea, but also Japan and the US. North Korea could also benefit from new Russian services, such as satellite imagery, updated electronic database for the electronic warfare equipments, maybe maritime transport, also hydrographic missions that could help with the deployment of submarines. In the long run, the Moscow-Pyongyang rapprochement may have far-reaching consequences, not only in Ukraine, not only in the Korean peninsula, but also worldwide. North Korea is re-emerging on the international stage, not just through diplomacy, but by participating in a major conflict on another continent. So this boosts Pyongyang's prestige, especially in the global south. The end of its exclusive relationship with China recalls also the Sino-Soviet competition in the 50s and 60s, competitions which has fueled North Korea's early industrial development. So maybe with a new competition between China and Russia in order to charm a little bit North Korea. It could also lead to a new industrial development of North Korea. Russian support at the United Nations may also break North Korea isolation, potentially turning it into a significant arms exporter to the global south, and maybe later an exporter of other goods for civilian use, for example. Finally, North Korean veterans could in the future become military contractors, either privately or under state direction. North Korea might thus position itself as a provider of battle-hardened private troops, kind of a Wagner group, but from North Korea. That's a possibility also that cannot be forgotten. These elements suggest that North Korea's involvement in Russia and Ukraine poses security and geopolitical risk to South Korea. From a security standpoint, South Korea could find itself in the coming years with thousands of well-trained North Korean soldiers positioned just a few dozen kilometers from its capital, and with a northern neighbor capable of rapidly producing modern weapons tailored for export, so with quality standards higher than what could be expected from North Korean industry so far. That could be a potential problem for South Korea. From a geopolitical perspective, the mutual defense agreement between Moscow and Pyongyang alone represents a major problem for Seoul and its allies. In addition to that, financing the North Korean system could strengthen its stability and make economic and diplomatic rapprochements with South Korea less necessary. This would permanently rule out, a possibility of reunification, from my point of view. For Europe and the broader West, Pyongyang's sustained support demonstrates that the pro-Russian bloc is willing to directly engage in this war. This raises a risk of escalation, including in other European states bordering Russia and Ukraine. Beyond Europe, Russia could also use North Korea as a proxy, either directly or, as I said, through some private military branches that could be fueled with North Korean soldiers. So a proxy to act in Africa, in the Middle East, or in Asia, in effect extending what Wagner Group has already been doing in these regions.
Point you made is potential North Korean PMC, right? Private military contractors, like Wagner Group of Russia, a few years ago. Do you really think that North Korean PMC is possible in the on demand later on in other parts of the world?
Oh, for me, it's quite a certainty, but it's quite a certainty that some North Korean citizens, at least, will become PMC.
Okay.
That's for me. That's for sure. Maybe they will join Wagner groups or other groups. You can't have thousands, 10,000s of soldiers sent to other countries for months, maybe years, learning to live away from the Kim's regimes, and hoping that all of them will go back in North Korea and become workers in factories or in the fields. So at least some of them will become PMCs, or maybe just Russian state soldiers. Also, that's a possibility. Is it possible that there will be North Korean private companies? I'm not sure, but North Korean state-owned private companies, that could be a possibility. We are not sure for that. It would depend. If the conflict goes for maybe 2 or 3 more years, for example, that could be a possibility. If the conflict ends in the following months, maybe not. So, that for me, that's a possibility to keep in mind also for South Korea, because we see with Wagner Group that Wagner Group was used in Africa to fight, or in Middle East also, to fight French and US soldiers directly, confrontations with Russian troops fighting French and US troops and losing mostly, but without the Russian flag. they were a Wagner group. So for South Korea, it could be also worrying that North Korea could have private military contractors fighting South Korea interests worldwide. So
Yeah, I think so. I mean, now it's North Korean troops are proving, their capacity, which is vastly improving in the combat, battleground, and then they, have a more, capacity to combat or battle outside of Russia is entirely possible, and it has a huge implication, military implication for the Korean Peninsula.
오늘 논의가 보여주는 것은 분명합니다. 북한은 러시아-우크라이나 간 분쟁 속에서 적극적으로 전쟁 당사자가 되었고 군사력을 대폭 증강하고 있습니다. 북한에게 이번 전쟁은 무기 수출을 넘어 실전 경험을 축적하고 방위 산업을 현대화하는 기회였습니다. 지난 Now in North Korea 시즌 1에서 프랑스 국제관계연구소의 연구위원 셀린 파준 박사는 러시아와 북한이 국제적으로 고립되어 있는 상황을 타개하기 위해 이 양자 관계를 러우전쟁을 통해 강화하고 있다는 점을 지적한 바 있습니다. 북한의 참전 기여도는 갈수록 높아지고 있습니다. 이러한 북한의 전략적 레버리지 강화는 유럽 대서양 지역과 인도 태평양 지역의 안보가 합쳐지는 촉매가 되었습니다. 모두에게 새로운 도전이 다가왔습니다.